Why Dan Hurley trusts his process, and you should too. You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side and is a big fan of the Monopoly Go mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. Well, if I told you January 18th, 2020, coming off a loss to Villanova, the Huskies limping to a 10-7 record to start the season, I'd be sitting here April 24th of 2024 wearing a back-to-back national title shirt, displaying all 6 rings on the side sleeve as well as on the base of the shirt. Some of you, including myself, would have called Dan Hurley crazy to say that it's coming. You know, better get us now. A very famous quote, kind of essentially calling his shot, calling what transpired last year and this year. 100% would have been flabbergasted if someone said, hey, I went into the future and you guys went back-to-back titles. I wouldn't have believed it. So he also didn't say when or if it was ever going to stop. So I know some of you already have called me crazy to suggest that a three-peat is in the works. The greatest fear that other programs in college basketball have had for years are these what ifs. What if UCLA resurrects their program? All that tradition and access to famous people in Hollywood, the intrigue of playing in LA, that hasn't happened. But a blip of a run with Ben Howland and Mick Cronin recently. What if Indiana can reclaim that magic? That Hoosiers magic, the Bobby Knights, the Steve Alfords, the Isaiah Thomas? Nope, that hasn't come to fruition. Nobody expected UConn to be the best basketball program of the modern era because it kind of truly has laid in the weeds, kind of like the way a lion hunts for its prey and then it pounces. But this modern basketball dynasty, if you will, that was for Dukes. That was the Dukes of the world, the Kansases, even Kentucky with John Calipari over the last 15 years. Not anymore. They don't have the rings. You can put Duke in the category because they've won the most in the modern era other than us with 5. But you can't put Kansas in there. You can't put Kentucky. You really can't even put Carolina in there. They've won 3 essentially in the modern era. But the reality is when Dan Hurley said, you better get us now, he meant that when it does come, that we're going to be back on top and we're here to stay on top. Because what's so interesting and crazy to me is no matter how much success, you'll still have haters. You'll still have people who question you. You're the best coach in college basketball. So what? Every year that can change. Every year that's a perception. For years, you heard the best coach in college basketball was Coach K, was Bobby Knight. But some of that perception changes. And if you really look at their in-game performances in pressure situations, in particular with Bobby Knight and also with Coach K, that moniker changes. You can't question Dan Hurley being the best coach in college basketball today because he hasn't lost a NCAA tournament game in 2 years. So, again, every year that can change. The beauty of Hurley and his staff is that they've won their way. They haven't had to go back to the drawing board after the Teddy Allen debacle. And if you're a casual fan or just someone who stumbled across this podcast, Teddy Allen is the gentleman who torched UConn for 37 in the first round, upset over UConn, where UConn had 0 ability to shoot. That was a seminal moment where Dan Hurley changed course of being this hard-nosed, rock fight coach, only defense. We'll worry about the offense. We'll worry about figuring out how to score in just getting the best athletes possible. We'll worry about that as it comes. But now we've kind of morphed into this. Defense hasn't changed. The effort, the ability to play defense has not changed. I think that's what's even so much more telling about what Dan Hurley expects from his UConn squads now is they not only have to come in with the same mindset of when he first started with those teams that were, fun but frustrating to watch on offense, but now let's take those same type players that can lock you down defensively and let's run an intricate offense on top of our effort on defense, and will be really hard to stop. So here we are. We're in this transfer portal world. We're in this NIL world. Are we ever going to be signing a top recruiting class? I'm talking like not the guys who we have now, not, the class last year with Steph, Jaden, Jalen, Singari, Solo. That's a top class, but it's not going to be Rivals top number one class or On3's number one class. That's going to be for, the Dukes and the Kansases of the world, because they still haven't figured it out that you can't put all-star teams together and just hope that you have a team. We'll get our 5-star McDonald's All-Americans from times. Yeah, Steph Castle was. How'd that turn out? It's pretty good, right? There's a sentiment from, I'm sure Coach Hurley can relate to. My friend Steve Forbes, the head coach at Wake Forest, famously said in a press conference, God, it's got to be like 10 years ago now, from his previous role at East Tennessee State University, ETSU. And this is a quote, dead quote. You can find it online. It's hysterical. Good guy. I recruit Burger King All-Americans that want to kick McDonald's All-Americans' asses. That's a lot of coaches' sentiment. But getting them to that point is difficult. And Steve has had a good history of recruiting talent that people kind of forget about and then getting the most out of them. I think Hurley is looking for a very specific mentality, very specific kind of players. And if you don't know where I'm going with all this, any recruit or transfer we get, there are no complete players. You have to, even if you have a pretty moniker like Liam McNeely, if he comes, he's a McDonald's All-American. That's great. What can you bring to UConn that we can build on? Dan Hurley and his staff. There are no finished products in college basketball. Because if you were a finished product, you'd spend a year with the G League Ignite, or you'd go play overseas, and then you go to the NBA. I know that there's a love affair with college basketball with players, and a lot of it is playing in the tournament and winning a title, all of that. So for those of you who are worried about getting Liam McNeely or others, the others are going to come and go, whether it's Kobe Brea, Liam Mahaney, or Aiden Mahaney. Trust the process. They know what they're doing. They don't need to oversell what they provide. The value of being in a Dan Hurley offense right now, NBA personnel now know if you're coming from UConn, you're NBA mind ready. If you're talented, then you'll have a place in their organization. We haven't got the official commit yet. I'm a little surprised. I really thought we were going to get a commit today or late last night. We have our feelers out with Brea and Mahaney, and I'm sure there's about 5 others that we don't know about. But remember, Nick Timberlake was the hot name. Nobody knew who Cam Spencer was. Think about this scenario. If we had gotten Nick Timberlake instead of Cam Spencer, we're not the national champions again. Not this year. It's really that simple. Now, I guess one could argue or change my mind that if Nick Timberlake got into Dan Hurley's system, maybe he plays like a Cam Spencer or that role. Perhaps. But the point of this is to tell you that no matter who I talk about, who the masses get excited about, who the so-called experts tell you is the next big thing to walk on UConn's campus, there's also 5 to 10 other guys Hurley and his staff have called and are backups. Cam Spencer was plan B. Let that sink in. It's insane to think about now. Well, we'll talk about more transfer portal news, more folks that are on our roster who I really feel like are going to make big leaps this year coming up after this. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everyone. Well, look, we just kind of went over this that I really feel like is important to kind of talk about, because whether Liam McNeely comes, whether we get Kobe Brea, who's apparently done Zoom calls with the 5 Blue Bloods that he mentioned, no news is good news, right? No news on the portal in regards to UConn, no news on recruits, because it's looking like Liam McNeely is the only freshman we're going to bring in outside of Isaiah Abraham and Ahmad Noel, who are already committed. But let's talk about for a second what it would mean to get players that are less impactful, like fillers. We have potential pros. We have potentially 2 pros on our roster right now. And you could argue 3 if you put Ahmad Noel in there. Jalen Stort is a dynamic wing, and he'll get his run at the 3 and the 4. He presents a genuine 3-point scoring threat, as we've witnessed in little stretches this year. He has incredible versatility across various spots on the court. And I think that's what's attractive to him in this offense, is because they don't have to put him in a situation, a catch and shoot guy or the Alex Caravan role. He really can be a dual threat, a triple threat type player. He's a smooth 3-point catch and shoot player in those scenarios. He has enhanced value as a pick and pop option and floor spacer. He's very comfortable operating in isolation, even though we don't do a ton of that. He's adept at creating space and scoring off the dribble. So there are ways that you can get him involved. Could you see him in a situation, and I'm asking this rhetorically, where he plays a little bit of that Cam Spencer role? I could. He's 6'7". He's a little bigger than what they would probably like for that role, to be coming off the screens and constantly running. Is he in shape for that? No, not yet. Not to that level. I think solo ball is more likely going to be in that situation, but he demonstrates that ability to be a back-to-the-basket scorer in kind of that Cam role, where when things would break down, when Tristan would do it, when Cam would do it, utilizing their strength in their frame to overpower defenders and finish efficiently at the basket. I think because of his build, he's got that length and strength that is complemented, and it's very deceptive from an athletic perspective. He's a sick athlete, just top shelf. But I think his length is underrated. I think the ability to work on a little bit of that float game, to kind of be in those trail situations where people are running you off the 3-point line. Because here's the thing, guys. Everyone talks about this. My dad, who you've seen on this show, has talked about this. Why don't people pull up for mid-range jump shots? They really don't think that that's a value 2 anymore. What are valuable twos in their mind are little 8-foot floaters, 6-foot floaters. In fact, in one of the articles that was written by Michael Cohen, and then we confirm this through our sources, is that Luke Murray does extensive research with this team on their hotspots, like where they're going to be able to be effective in this offense. Is you may be a good 12-foot mid-range jump shooter. Maybe you shoot that at a 40 or 50% clip. But if you get really good at that 8-foot float game or that 6-foot float game, those efficiencies and those percentages rise. So these are the type of things that UConn is doing on a regular basis with guys like Jalen Stort, with solo ball. And they won't know what they have until they start to play in games and start to kind of get all of this information and collaborate with them to kind of. So I'm just going to put this out there. The offseason and that non-conference schedule that UConn just put out, whether they're playing Texas, they're playing Baylor, they're playing in Maui, all of the efficiency numbers that they're going to get is going to really shape which guys step up, which guys will get playing time, and really kind of show where the improvement will kind of come. So if at the beginning of the season you see some guys struggling and maybe they're taking shots that aren't conducive with this offense, I think you'll see a change to getting them to where they need to be. If you notice this year, if you go back and watch this offense this year, I've done it many times. There are a few times where I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, shoot that. But in my head, I'm also thinking about, oh, they probably thought they were in the wrong spot on the floor. Like they're not a good shooter from that wing, or free throw line extended to the 3-point line. That's not Tristan Newton's hotspot. But if you notice, anytime they get wide open shots around the top of the key area, Cam Spencer and Tristan Newton would always shoot those. They wouldn't pass those shots up because that's probably where they were the most effective in this offense. So just that kind of mentality is really kind of where I feel like a kid like Jalen Stewart is going to make a leap. They feel like he has that Alex Caravan-like processing ability along with more of a dynamic athlete. I also think he can be an incredible locked down defender. Him in solo balls length that's why I feel like we have two pros already, because defense travels. We just talked about how Dan Hurley pivoted from a defense only mindset to offense, but you still need to play defense. And these kids' effort on defense is what's going to set them apart, because I think we've already seen that they can score. Jalen Stewart, 9 straight points in the Big East final. Solo ball, 13 points at Madison Square Garden, same place earlier in the year against North Carolina. These two are going to be huge parts of what UConn is going to be doing in 2024-2025 season. So I'm not as concerned about if they don't get a top target. I think I would be disappointed if they didn't get Liam McNeely. I think he'll be the one big splash. But I did agree with one of the comments I got on YouTube about how I don't feel like we're going to get Kobe Brea. I don't know if we're going to get a guy like Max Shulga, who I've talked about, who I think I love. That just sounds funny. It's a tough one. I feel like they do need to find that big guard that can provide some leadership, that kind of 23, 24-year-old guy that Cam was, to come in. And I think that's Kobe. I think that could be Aiden Mahaney. I think I retweeted this from Jeff Goodman. It said that Mahaney is visited USC. He's on his he'll be visiting UConn and Creighton. But at the end of the tweet, it said something like, and he's also at UVA, because he was talking about really good offensive teams and coaches and their ability to get the most out of their offensive players. And by the way, he's at Virginia right now. So I don't think Virginia is a threat to get an Aiden Mahaney, because I think he'd be wasted there for a year. What's he going to accomplish there that he couldn't at a team like UConn, which is, obviously the top of the food chain right now. Listen, no disrespect to UVA. Good program. They seem to always win the ACC, regardless of how inept their offensive talent is. But look, their collective front court skills of solo ball, of Jaden Ross, of Ahmad Noel, the spacing beyond the arc that he'll be able to facilitate with a Jalen Stewart, all of these decision-making within this offensive structure is, I think, going to really enhance the overall dynamic of this team and create multiple options in half-court play. And that's what they want. I think the last quote I heard from Dan Hurley talking about the offense was that him and Luke also took some derision from the Kansas City Chiefs, and also who's the coach at San Francisco? Kyle Shanahan. Now, you don't have to like Kyle Shanahan. I'm not a huge fan of his in-game decision-making, but his ability to create plays and make you think that one thing is coming and then hit you with something else. So UConn's ability to draw up plays and create the type of indecision that the defense has to have, I think this team presently constituted isn't complete, but it can be, as you're going to have guys that make that leap from a basketball perspective. And it's their job to do it, right? Not the players. The coaches are going to work with them to make sure that they're making the leap. Because here's the thing that people don't talk about. In college basketball now, guys, if you don't show promise in your first or second year, you're gone. And it's not because you're gone because, you're a bad person or you kind of blew up the culture of the team. It's because they're going to find someone to fit that role. essentially college basketball is professionalized. And if you can't get the job done in a year or two, they will find someone to replace you that's older, that's done it before in a different place, and then teach them their system. So I think that's something that you have to look for. And speaking of looking for something, the Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise. Please say the Giants are picking a quarterback with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Please, 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 baby Jesus, tell me that the Giants are trading up to the pick 3 and getting Drake May. That's all I have to say. We'll talk about around the transfer portal more and everything else after this. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches in the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, charge with other players' rent for their iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chess in the tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Let me tell you about my recent experience with buying tickets. Ever had one of those frustrating moments when you're trying to snag tickets for a Major League Baseball game? I sure have. Whether it was uncertainty about seat quality, struggling to find last minute tickets, or just not finding any good deals. But here's the game changer. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. Seriously, this app makes getting tickets a breeze. Plus, the prices actually drop as game time approaches. It's like getting rewarded for procrastinating. I've been using Game Time for a while now, and let me tell you, it's life-altering. You can browse through upcoming MLB games and other hot events, snagging killer last-minute deals, and even double-checking your views from your seat before you buy. And the best part? You get all-in pricing with no hidden fees at checkout. So if you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions may apply. All right, guys. So let's take a look at where the portal stands right now. As a, here are our targets. If you need a reminder, Kobe Brea is a top shooting guard, combo guard, 6'6", 50% three-point shooter. He is looking at us, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, and I think that's it. In North Carolina. I really do think it comes down to us or Kentucky. I think Carolina would be third. I think Duke and Kansas are fourth and fifth, just based off of who they've already signed and the fit. As far as Aiden Mahaney, we talked about him a little bit. I think for him, the biggest issue is, where does he fit on a team? Is there a need for him right away? Obviously, I think that means UConn. I actually do think it does mean Virginia. I don't think that he's going to pick Virginia, but I wouldn't be surprised if he went to Creighton either, and we had to play him a couple times a year. As far as where things stand in the transfer portal, let's take a look at where our board is. We are here. So, I asked a few people, and we can talk about Liam McNeely a little bit here too, and just to kind of give everyone an update. I reached out to multiple sources that know him very well, that have covered him in college basketball, but also in terms of how'd the visit go, and it's all positive news. There's nothing that's like, oh, he didn't like it or it wasn't a fit. He's a fit. Let's just put that out there, right? Liam is a fit. It's really going to be about, does he want to come here? Because we are not going to be giving him the type of money that he could get at Kentucky. Simple as that. our budget is about $2 million less total from all the reports of Kentucky's NIL budgets being between 5 and 10 million. I think from what I've heard, and the estimations are closer to 3 or 4 million for UConn, and the ability to kind of spread that around. And I also feel like, too, guys, one of the reasons why we don't lose as many players is, yes, do they want to be here? Yes. Do they want to be coached by Dan Hurley and his staff? 100%. But the other aspect is, I think they get re-upped in terms of their their NIL money. So if Solo Ball got X amount of money to come to UConn from an NIL perspective, he likely got a little more money to stay this year. The way scholarships used to work, it was 4 one-year scholarships. Now NIL is 4 one-year contracts. So what you get when you first come into college may not be what you're going to get your sophomore year, junior year. And that's a reason why some guys leave. It may not be a fit, but it also, like I'm looking at the board here, what Mark Mitchell got to go to Duke, he probably wasn't getting to come back his sophomore year. Now, they also could have had an honest conversation with him and said, hey, this is how an honest conversation starts. We gave you $500K to come here, hypothetical situation, by the way. But now we're only willing to give you $100,000 to stay. And he goes, the hell you are. I'm going to Missouri, where they're going to give me $600,000. That's life in college basketball today. So just wanted to make sure people understood that it's sometimes out of the player's control, and sometimes it is. I think we've even heard Dan Hurley say that in interviews. Some of it is in their control, some of it isn't. Because let's face it, whether Steph Castle wanted to stay or not, I don't think he should have stayed, because I don't think we would have put all of our NIL money into him for a second year, considering he's going to be a top 10 pick. So spending wisely on a guy like Aiden Mahaney, spending wisely on a guy like Kobe Brea is, I feel like, where we're going to go. I'd love for them to get involved in, if let's say like someone like Rylan Griffin backs out of Kansas, where he looks like he's going to go. Wouldn't mind seeing him, because he's a very good shooter. I think he plays good defense, even though no one at Alabama was a lockdown defender. I really do feel like Dan Hurley could get the best out of him at 6'6". And I mentioned a guy yesterday that we're going to essentially close the podcast on, because there's been talks about Desmond Claude. Absolutely not a fit. More of a mid-range merchant. Definitely not a guy that I feel like can be a 3 guy, or in a breakdown scenario. Zurich Phelps. JC Zembel, our rivals, a correspondent in the transfer portal and also recruiting world, put me onto him. I started looking at his film. And my question to him was, who's a Tristan Newton clone? Who's someone that you can look at that is a Tristan Newton-like replacement? And that was who he sent me. And honestly, go watch it yourself. You don't believe me? Go watch it. Go watch when he drives to the hoop. I think he's a better athlete than Tristan, but I also feel like he has that same pacing where it's stop and go. It's not always 100 miles an hour, pedals to the metal. He's got some wiggle in his game, along with the ability to pull up and attack. And I just realized that I didn't add my the correct on today's show. So what we're gonna do, just so I can have this, is I'm gonna show you guys what it was supposed to be. It's pretty funny. But yeah, I think a guy like Zurich Phelps is the type of guy that I feel like could be an under the radar guy. I guarantee he's not the there it is. Seton and Hurley we trust. The sophomores got next, and we're doing around the portal right now. I feel like a guy like Phelps is a perfect example of a guy that could be a fit. And there is, I guarantee you, remember, 1,700 plus players in the portal. That means there are 20, 30, 40, 50 guys that you, me, nobody, even if this is your full-time job and all you do is study the transfer portal, there's no way you can cover all these players. So when a player's name pops up, you do some research on them. and see if he's a fit. And I guarantee that's all that's happening with these coaches. You don't have to trust me, do it yourself. Listen, this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I am enjoying every episode I do. And just to give you a heads up, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available in the free Fire TV channels app. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, and make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.